Welcome back to IDP Plus Trends, where we break down Week 10 IDP rankings for this week for you. A lot of people right now in fantasy football are checked out. It's a long season. Week 10, here we are, close to playoffs. So this is very important. More importantly, time to check to get these rankings right for your Week 10 fantasy football matchup. So welcome back to IDP Plus Trends. We're going to start it off with talking top 15 at each position, looking at the defensive linemen for week 10, followed by the linebackers, and then finally defensive back. So right now, I'm going to share my screen here with all you people who are watching with us. I will recite the names for you to all those people who are just listening. But if you take a look at the screen right now, you can see where I'm getting these rankings on our IDP Plus website that we have right now. We are running a promo code. If you are not a subscriber already, go to idpplus.com, check out for your subscription. And when you do that, use the promo code PROPS and you will get 20% off that subscription. So once again, idpplus.com, and then use the promo code PROPS for when you check out to get your 20% off. And you can view all these rankings. I'll hover over rankings. You see we have Dynasty, Consensus, Season rankings. Weekly rankings is where I'll be going. And finally, projections, looking at season-long offense and defensive players. So right now, we're going to check into our defensive linemen. I'm going to weekly here to see our Week 10 defensive linemen at the top 15. Here we go, Steve. Number 1 is going to be TJ Watt. Number 2, Nick Bosa. Number 3, Will Anderson. Number 4, Micah Parsons. Number 5, Trey Hendrickson. Number 6, Josh Hines Allen. Number 7, Dexter Lawrence. Number 8, Jared Verse. Number 9, Danielle Hunter. 10, Brian Burns. 11, Will McDonald. 12, Alex Highsmith. 13, Trayvon Walker. 14, Quinnen Williams. And 15, Josh Sweat. So, Steve, looking at this top 15 here, we've had Hendrickson was a letdown. He already played this week. Was pretty adept at getting sacks this season. Josh Hines Allen, we see back on the board here. Obviously, we've talked about him before, how he's been a letdown. We all in the community know that, but we know his potential as somebody who's not only led the league in sacks, but also gets those tackles. So he could be a walking bomb. Had a nice game last week. Maybe the good times are rolling for him. But looking at this top 15, Steve, what pops out at you?
Like you mentioned, obviously Josh Hines Allen is still just ranked too high. He's got to prove it right now. He's got to have actually more than just one game. He's got to have a couple back-to-back games to prove that he should be even in the top 20 as far as rankings. So he's definitely somebody I would consider moving down. I'd actually consider moving down Micah Parsons. I think he's way too high right now. They have not even announced that he's going to play. He's still in that questionable phase. They're hoping he does. But I think realistically, I'm just seeing this from an outside perspective. I'm not in the Cowboys organization, but you don't have Dak Prescott for I would say at least 6 weeks. I think that's the minimum. The season's in the dump. There is no reason or real push to put Micah Parsons in, and there's a chance he could get shut down for the season. So I'd move him out of there too. I think he's a little too high. You're looking at the rest of the top 15. I don't hate the list for a lot of these other guys. I think Alex Highsmith is obviously in a good spot. Obviously, I've talked about Quinnen Williams in the waiver wire video, Josh Sweat in the waiver wire video. Like both of those guys have some really good matchups. So I like a lot of those. But if I'm moving Josh Hines, Allen, and Micah Parsons out, I'm moving Greg Rosso up, who's at 16. I'd move him up. Probably into that 11-10 range. I think he's got a great matchup in Indy going against a statue in the backfield in Joe Flacco. He does not move. And Greg has been great. And the other guy who's not in this top 15, which drives me nuts right now, especially since their matchup is amazing, is Van Ginkel. Like Van Ginkel obviously didn't have a great game, but he's got a matchup where he's going against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have a horrible offensive line, and now starting Mac Jones. Like you're not getting Trevor Lawrence. So this is like a perfect scenario for Van Ginkel to have another great game. I would put him easily in the top 6, maybe range. I'd put him where Josh Hines Allen is right now. Like that's probably like the biggest like, what are we doing type of thing. Because Van Ginkel is way too low on this list. I would move him up absolutely in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I like Van Ginkel to move up into this list, crack this list, walking bomb. Doesn't just have to be tackles, and actually, that's how his season's been. He's been a fine, supplier of tackles, but also those splash plays are really what get him going. So he didn't have that last week, and he is dependent. It seems like on those, but does have somewhat of a safe tackle floor. So yeah, I could understand a case to be made for him to definitely be in this top 15. Another teammate who I like of Van Ginkel's this week, who's not on this list. This is top 15, so this is all basically DL1 plays. So we can't have everybody be a DL1, but somebody who I do think could finish there. A couple more people, I should say. So we'll talk about the teammate for Van Ginkel, and that's Jonathan Grenard. I think he could have a nice week this week. We're not going to see Trevor Lawrence. It's going to be. It looks like Mac Jones is going to come out and play, start a game. So maybe a good chance for Grenard to keep the good times rolling, get another sack here versus Jacksonville. Also, George Karlaftis, understand, like I said, it's top 15. It's tight pickings, but George Karlaftis has been rolling. A lot of people might have drafted him and dropped him, but he's resurfaced again, 3 games back to back to back with a sack. So looks good on him. Also, Kobe Turner. I've started him in a couple leagues, especially if you're in a defensive tackle league. Kobe Turner, back-to-back games now with 6 or more tackles. Actually, had 6 the past 2. So I believe in a sack the last game too. So another big game for him. Gets another top 5 matchup this week. So Kobe Turner. Hopefully the good times keep rolling for him. Steve, someone you had mentioned before. Talking about last week is a little bit further down on this list as all these 4 guys I mentioned, but another one is DeForest Buckner. Comes back 3 tackles, and I think 3 and 4 tackles the first 2 games. Comes back
Yeah.
sacks in both matchups, and now he gets another top 5 matchup too. So I think DeForest Buckner, not only a player that you have to bank on the sacks, but supplies those solo tackles, those overall tackles, combined tackles, and is definitely a fine bet. Maybe could end up as a DL1. Steve, anybody else in that category?
Um, I mean, looking at the list, like I said, there's definitely some movements I would do. And you obviously you guys can go to the website and kind of nitpick where these rankings are. But another one that I feel might actually have a decent game is Montez Sweat. I like his matchup against New England. You got the
Yeah.
rookie in May. I would love to have seen Zadarius Smith, but I don't think they're going to play him. I'm not sure. They haven't really announced it yet, but I like that one as well.
Yeah.
Um, Tunzel's been struggling for Houston. Like, he's not doing a great job right now protecting CJ Stroud. So I would have loved to have him move up if he does end up playing again. I don't think they've announced it yet. But yeah, I mean, again, we're kind of nitpicking. These are probably guys you're going to put as like your DL2, your DN2. Like, these aren't guys who are going to be absolute studs, but I do think they deserve a little bit more movement because there are certain players on here that just haven't had any great success that kind of need to be moved down a little bit. But yeah, there's probably a couple of people I would mention.
Well, if you like what you see in this top 15, go to idpplus.com, become a subscriber. Or if you are, already check out the rest of the rankings here we have at Defensive Linemen. We have four bye weeks this week. Browns are out, Packers are out, Raiders and Seahawks. So you'll see that reflected in the rankings. Some of these guys might, come into this top 15 who usually don't. 4 teams on a bye is pretty heavy. So, the rankings are going to be a little wacky this week, but it's fun time to be ranking them. We get a different taste, and it's some guys that usually don't have their shot at the top 25, top 15 can crack it. So that's always exciting. Like you'll see in some of my linebacker rankings here. So looking at week 10 linebackers, going over the top 15. Number 1 I have is Bobby Wagner. Number 2, EJ Speed. Number 3, Roquan Smith. Number 4, Fred Warner. Number 5, Zaire Franklin. Number 6, Jermaine Pratt. Number 7, Logan Wilson. Number 8, Levante David. Number 9, Foye Aluakun. Number 10, Jamian Sherwood. Number 11, Eric Kendricks. 12, Dorian Williams. 13, N'Kobe Dean. 14, teammate Zach Bond, and 15, Jack Campbell. Now, Steve, before I pass it over to you, I just wanted to go over a couple things with some of these top 15 guys right here. So, first off, this is a week, like I mentioned, some of these guys aren't usually in the top 15 that are right now. I mean, first off, this week in general, week 10, looks like we're going to get Azeez Al-Shaair back, even though he didn't crack my list. Looks like Troy Anderson is going to be back and healthy, so that bumps down, Caden Ellis a little bit, even though I still like him the most out of those three linebackers. Probably takes Nate Landman out of the streaming world a little bit, his luster at least. And then it looks like for Minnesota, Blake Cashman might come back. So, Ivan Pace is questionable as it is. I still think he's going to have a nice week. He hasn't cracked this top 15 list, as you can see. But Blake Cashman comes back. Maybe he becomes a streamer. Keep in mind, he's questionable right now, so nothing's guaranteed. But with Pace ailing there and Blake Cashman, if he can come back and crack the starting lineup for Minnesota, maybe he can be a good streamer. But so let's look at this rankings here. Starting out with number 2 is the first guy I want to talk about. But Bobby Wagner, I should say, just the number 1 is just model of consistency. Top 3 matchup versus Pittsburgh. I think he's a very safe floor. Probably gets 7 to 10 tackles. So I like Bobby Wagner a lot this week. You can make a case for EJ Speed. A lot of rankings you'll find Zaire Franklin ahead of Speed, but Speed is one game less played, but actually more solo tackles and is just completely killing it. Like this is like Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs types vibes here in Indianapolis. I love seeing this. So EJ Speed, I got up there, but 6 out of 8 games played, double-digit tackles, 22 tackles in the past 2 games, averaging 10 tackles, over 10 tackles a game on the season. Like I mentioned, more solos than Zaire with 1 less game played. So number 2 might be Rich, but I think he's deservingly so. Looking at number 6 and 7, Pratt and Logan Wilson both played, both had 8 tackles, so they did pretty well for us this week. Looking at number 8, Levante David, 8 tackles in the last 2 weeks, both games, but those were pretty bad matchups this week. He gets San Francisco, a top 10 matchup. So I think Levante David's a walking bomb. Love him a lot this week. My next player I want to talk about, number 10, Jamien Sherwood. 7 solos, 2 sacks versus Houston last week. This week, Mosley is inactive again, already ruled out. So Sherwood, I think, is a safe LB1, top 10. Fire him up, and start him with confidence. So CJ Mosley, no guarantee when he's coming back. And Sherwood looks like kind of like a Zaire Franklin, like how he came out of the wickets just a few years ago. So he's a huge walking bomb. Number 11, Kendricks from Dallas, questionable right now with the shoulder injury, 4:25 start time. It's the middle game, so it's going to be a little bit risky there if you roll him out. Hopefully we get some kind of confirmation here, but he's been pretty hot, leading the team in tackles and doing well, and Overshone next to him too. I like him too, but Kendricks to me, number 11 is a great start this week if he plays. And then finally, Zach Bond. We talked about Zach Bond and Kobe Dean, how they just keep flip-flopping, man. And Zach Bond, 22 tackles over the last 2 games. And those were bad matchups. This week he gets Dallas. I think it's a plus matchup. I know Dak's not there, but I still like Zach Bond this week, top 15. There's some other guys that I have on this, who I have later on this list aren't on it. Like I had said, Azeez could be someone who I think creeps up. Jack Gibbons this week, is coming off back-to-back good weeks. Christian Roseboom, and Alex Anzalone. I believe I have Jack Campbell at number 15. I have him surpassing Alex Anzalone. Steve, I know you're an Alex Anzalone fan, and it probably doesn't bode well for me to pass him up with his teammate, but first of all, I went on a little rant there. Anything else you want to say about this top 15? And then your boys, Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell, where do they stand in your book?
It's tough because I liked Jack Campbell when he came out of college, and then he didn't really get the opportunity. I mean, he had some opportunity, and then Anzalone did really well. But then Anzalone in the last couple of games has not really stood out, and Jack Campbell in the last 2 games has 20 total tackles. So like if you're scoring based off tackles, 20 tackles in 2 games is a great stat line, and it's at least consistent. So I understand where you're at now. I personally would have moved Jack Campbell down and moved Henley up. I like Henley a lot. He's been fantastic this season.
Yep.
And I just think it's tough because I think script wise, I think that's going to be a closer game where I think Henley will still have to deal with like Pollard in the run game. I think Lions destroy Houston, and I think that just deletes, Mixon's value in the game, which might hurt both Anzalone and Campbell
You're right.
when it comes to the tackling side. We'll see. I mean, obviously Houston's going to try to put a good game plan, but when you don't have your star wide receivers, you're really going to focus on Mixon and Dell. No one's nervous or scared about Robert Woods or Xavier Hutchinson or anything like that. So it's going to make things a lot easier for Detroit on the defensive side, because obviously that's still something they're working on. I am so I'm kind of hesitant on those two realistically, but I love Henley. I think Henley is just right outside. I think he's great. You mentioned obviously some players that are hurt, right? Eric Kendricks, there's a chance he doesn't play. So we'll see how that goes. I know he wants to play, but that's a tough one. And then, looking at the rest of that list, it's hard to move anybody else. Like I love Jamie and Sherwood. I think he's been amazing. Levante's been good. I mean, those guys are all in the right spots. We're just kind of nitpicking that last little bit. And then looking at the rest of the list, if we really were to go into anything else, I mean, yeah, there's really nobody else. I think Troy Anderson actually ends up having a good, if he does end up playing all snaps. We'll see what happens with what Atlanta does. I think he'll start to move back up, because prior to being hurt, like you got to give Anderson some, you got to give him some credit as far as what he was able to do. A lot of it was big play, right? Like he made some big plays here or there, but he was, I think one game he had 16 tackles, another game he had 12 tackles. Like he put up some points. So we'll see how they transition him to coming back from injury. But no, I don't hate. I mean, looking at matchups and looking where these players are at, there's really not much to nitpick. I think I said Henley's probably the only one I would move. I'd probably move him out just a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a real nice game against Cleveland last week, and should have a good matchup this week. I like him a lot, just outside sitting there. So check out the rest of the rankings on idpplus.com. Get your subscription if you are not subscribed, and get the rest of those rankings. I have about 60 linebackers on there. Right now, we're going to move over to the defensive backs. And like I mentioned, Steve, there's some players that made the top 15 linebackers that you haven't seen on there before coming out of my textbook. But defensive backs, really, I got a couple in here. So looking at number one, I think the top five pretty much chalk here for me. Usually, how the way I go. But number one, second leading tackler in the NFL, Budda Baker. Number two, Kyle Hamilton, already played. Hopefully get well soon. Hopefully it's not a long-term injury. They said it wasn't too serious, so good vibes for Kyle Hamilton. Number three, Nick Cross. Number four, Antoine Winfield Jr. Number five, Brian Branch. Number six, Deshaun Elliott. Number seven, Jesse Bates. Number eight, DeMar Hamlin. Number nine, Damani Richardson. Number 10, Quentin Lake. Number 11, Brandon Jones. Number 12, Kevin Byard. Number 13, Kirby Joseph. Number 14, Diamador Lenore. And number 15, Derwin James Jr. So before I turn it over to you, Stephen, get your opinion on my list here, I just wanted to mention, like I had said before about Budda Baker, tackle heavy supreme. Stephen mentioned before he's in a league where Budda Baker maybe at this point is in after 12 tackles last week, but it just keeps really outpacing the defensive back position, the safety position as far as tackles. Is actually second in the NFL in tackles. Unprecedented, man. It's crazy from a defensive back. So he gets my nod. I mean, we look at the matchup. We got the Jets. If you like what you saw last week, Aaron Rodgers and company. I mean, hopefully they bring that type of game and throw the ball, air it out, and Budda Baker's going to have another killer game. So love him a lot. Nick Cross, another guy, 10 tackles last game, fourth in the NFL with 86 combined tackles. Another guy who's, if you're close to leading the league in tackles, you're going to be high on my rankings, that's for sure. Antoine Winfield, man, number 4, 33 tackles, one sack, fumble recovered, and a touchdown in those last 4 games since returning, averaging over 8 tackles a game. This week, it's a top 5 matchup with San Francisco. He gets my seal of approval. Love Winfield this week and the rest of the season, really. Moving into number 8, a guy who's moving up and up, and that's Damar Hamlin. If you watch my bet show, I predicted him to have over 6.5 combined. I said last time he played Miami in week 2, he got 10. Guess what? He got 10 again last week. And, while it's not the same matchup, he does get another good matchup with Indy. It's a top 3 matchup. So Hamlin, probably a good bet to get 7 or 8 tackles this week. He comes in at number 8. Number 9, here's the name I really was talking about guys you have unheralded, haven't seen on this list before, and that's Damani Richardson. This is his second week. Week 10, I'm sorry, week 9 was his second week of starting. Undrafted free agent rookie out of Texas A&M. Took over for Nick Scott there. Kind of like, who is Nick Scott anyway? In these first 2 games, played 100% both games, snaps, 23 tackles. I believe it was 12 and 10. So double-digit tackles back-to-back games. Gets a great matchup versus the Giants. That's a top 10 matchup. Another guy who gets my seal of approval. A small litmus test. I mean, he's playing 100% of snaps. And I think this is, not only a week 10 move, but rest of the season, man. I mean, I think he's just a walking bomb. And until he cools off, he definitely belongs in the top 10, I believe. So maybe a little bit spicy there, a little bit hot. But, yeah, I like Damani Richardson a lot this week. And finally, Steve, someone who we had mentioned, ought to be on this list, deserved it. The last 4 weeks, 23 tackles, 2 picks, forced fumble, 3 pass defenses. I know Budda Baker, you had mentioned, is not owned in that in that big play league you have, but I'm sure Diamador Lenore is, because he's just been killer over the last 5 games. And if you're in a big play, maybe you get 3 points for a pass defense, 5 points for a pick, those kind of outlier points for, each stat. This is your type of player. I mean, I have one other cornerback in the top 15. That's Brian Branch. I think he's in everyone's top 5, so no surprise there. But usually I'm, biased against the corners, but Diamador Lenore gets my seal of approval, Steve. So that's the last player I want to talk about in my top 15 there. What are your feelings on it?
Yeah, Lenore definitely deserves some credit. I mean, we talked about the waiver wire video and you watched that. I mean, Lenore's been on my list. Damar Hamlin's been on my list of waivers, and these are guys that are available, and yet people are still not going after them. And I'm not sure. I've noticed in the fantasy community, and I think we could say that with about any sport, is the brand and the name of a player kind of keeps people tied to them. So, if you really want to win, that's what we're here for, is to give you advice on players that we're not biased to anything. Like, we're just looking at the analytics, the matchups, things like that to help you guys out. Stop putting people in your lineup because their name is familiar or they used to go to the Pro Bowl at one point. Like, the Pro Bowl is a popularity contest at this point. It's not necessarily the best possible player that played that season in that position. So, like, too many times, like, the first person I always think about is I see Minkah Fitzpatrick, right? You're a Steeler fan. You've got him ranked 28th. And I'm sure that's hard to swallow because Minkah in the past has been an amazing safety.
Yep.
But his counterpart, Elliott, has been playing lights out compared to him. Like, Minkah just doesn't look the same. But he's constantly rostered and he's constantly being played.
Yep.
There's at a certain point you've got to start looking at everything, and so some of these names are going to be a little different than what we're used to saying. Like, again, Damar Hamlin, who couldn't even scratch the starting lineup, is now a player that should be worth it. I talked about Elliott, right? Again, another guy you should be. Kirby Joseph, love Kirby Joseph. Like, the rankings look really good. There are a couple things I would possibly maybe make some changes. And they're not even like big changes. Like, and he's not on here, is Brisker. He's supposed to be back for Chicago. We'll see. He's supposed to be back. We'll see. He was great before he left. Again, he's not the most consistent tackler, but I think he had in those first 5 games of the season, he had, I think, 40 tackles. So it's not bad, So again, Brisker, I think he's definitely worth someone to, again, probably on waivers, and I wish I had mentioned him. I completely didn't know if he was coming back this week, so I kind of held off. So I like him a lot. I think he's got some value and worth considering. Another player that I was looking at trying to figure out who would I move if I'm gonna move anybody. And again, it's tough. Like, I wouldn't say there's anybody completely out of the blue that I would say, oh, you got to put in your lineup. But I think Blankenship is another guy. I hate talking about the Eagles. I really do, especially this week. But I think Blankenship deserves some credit and just a little bit higher. I don't know if I put him quite in that 15th mark, but I just feel his matchup is really good against Cooper Rush and really the Lone Ranger and CeeDee Lamb in that offense. So I just think he might be of some value. But other than that, I think the list is good. I love the fact that you Kirby's up there and DeMar's up there. A lot of these guys that have just not gotten any love anywhere else. Like I do look at other rankings from other websites. Even big companies like ESPN and Yahoo and some of these others that I got inspiration from when I started into the content world. And some of these guys just completely miss a lot. So I like to see where we stand and what we're doing, what we're thinking compared to what these bigger corporate companies are, because I think we put so much time into it. I think it shows a lot.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I think we come up with great rankings here. I mean, if you check out some big names there, that's why I kind of say like you kind of check yourself. When you check those rankings, like wait a minute, X and X has them at 5. Do I really want to put them at 10? But at the end of the day, you go with your gut, and it's backed on your research. And when you do a lot of it, like you and I do with our waiver wires with these rankings, it becomes pretty fun, and you get a really good feeling about it, and you trust your gut. So. I think we've done a great job here, not only with this top 15 list with the defensive backs, but also with linebackers and defensive linemen. So, Steve, anything else before you wanted to mention? I'll give a couple quick streamers this week. Just wanted to mention some people who I didn't have crack the top 15 who easily could end up there. Keep an eye out for Tyke Smith from Tampa Bay. A lot of people like Christian Izien playing that slot cornerback role, but he actually played 2%. It was Tyke Smith. Tyke Smith is just like, really does well as a nickelback, does well against the run, pretty good against passing too. And, when you check his box score, it looks like he's their, besides now that Winfield's back, their leading defensive back. I mean, most games he's doing better than Whitehead now. So Tyke Smith, huge upside. I think right now, as it stands, your boy Brisker is questionable. So if he doesn't play, Elijah Hicks over the last 3 games, his replacement is more than capable. 20 tackles over the last 3 games. So Elijah Hicks, keep an eye out. But when Brisker comes back, he's cracking my top 10, no doubt. Double-digit tackle potential any given game. And then finally, wanted to mention in LA, we got some shakeup here. Cameron Curl doesn't look like a player you can roster or start with confidence, at least this week. Played about 50% of snaps. We saw the rookie Cam Kitchens come in and get a lot of snaps, a lot of work in Curl's place. So really can't start either guy with confidence here, but Kitchens looks to have some big upside. Not sure exactly what's the latest news there with the Rams, but also, I mean, they're Quentin Lake making this list. Quentin Lake seems like the best defensive back out of this whole trio. So also now they have this Jalen McCullough playing maybe at Curl's expense too. So that's a guy who's you'll see later in these rankings. Maybe a guy I wouldn't be surprised if he had another nice week this week. So a lot of fluid situations here, but there's a lot of guys that cracked this list who this is their first time. There's a lot of guys who didn't crack the list who maybe could crack it for the first time this week. So Steve, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
No, just make sure you go to the website, look at these rankings. Again, check out any other articles and other stuff that help you guys out in your fantasy space. Of course, subscribe to the channel here. Hit us up in the comments, man. We've read some great comments. We try to answer as fast as we can when we can, but just hit us up in the comments. We've got some great football. We got an early 9:30 Eastern time Germany game. It's not the most amazing game, but it's a game. So we get to wake up to some football, which is great news. And we're week 10, man. We're not far from the playoffs. It's almost around the corner. So, and we're going to be going through bye week hell. So pay attention. There's gonna be a lot of players out there gonna be missing. So, but yeah, other than that, I'm ready for some football.
As for always, thanks for viewing, listening. Thanks for rocking with us. Good luck in your Week 10 matchups. We will see you.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.